Hello, and welcome to episode number 147 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I'm here with my loser friends, Mark and Neelan. Say hello.
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 Logged record will indicate otherwise, but go on.
Well, I was going to go with you said hello on cue, so that proves something. Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we are going to be covering some of the latest hotness and getting to our featured topic. Today's topic is on board game compromises. What would we be willing to give up X in exchange for Y, the illustrious Y, but not why do things, but Y as in algebra. Y. That's a math reference for all you smart people out there. But before we get to our featured topic, we will cover Lost Ruins of Arnak, Ohanami, by Pandasaurus Games, as well as a game that I'm very excited to talk about, Beyond the Sun, by Rio Grande Games, or Rio Grande, who could say. All right, Neelan, everyone on the internet is talking about this game. Everyone on the internet is saying, should I play Lost Ruins of Arnak, or should I get Dune Imperium? Neelan, you are here to answer that question. Tell us about Lost Ruins of Arnak.
I'm glad you introduced it that way because I think it could not be better served by being back-to-back with our discussion of Dune Imperium. The Lost Ruins of Arnak is a game by designers who are their names just on the cover are Min and Elwyn, which I assume are pseudonyms, but I could not verify their actual names, and CGE. This was kindly given to us as a preview prototype copy by CGE, and the premise of the game thematically is about you being these explorers in a very, high adventure, pulp fiction-y, Indiana Jones, Uncharted, National Treasure, like you're exploring the lost ruins of some jungle territory in this fictional civilization of Arnak, trying to find artifacts, trying to find some discoveries, the lost ruins, ostensibly. You do that by having a combination of worker placement and deck building. This is going to sound familiar to Dune Imperium. I'm going to do my best to avoid every comparison I can to the game until it's relevant. But on the surface, what you're doing is you have a hand of cards. Those cards have in the top left corner a travel icon, which is either a boat, a boot, a car, a plane, and those will dictate the locations that you can send one of your two archaeologists to on this worker placement map. At the start of the game, there are only a handful of 5 spaces you can send it to, and they all just cost boots. But as you explore more of the map, one of the actions is to send your explorer into the unknown, unveil a new worker placement spot with some dangerous guardian that's protecting it. And once they've done that, you've now unlocked a new worker placement spot for the remainder of the game. These are generally harder to get to, which means you need to get better travel icons in order to get to them. And you're doing all of this in service of what is eventually a collect one of 5 different resources in the game to convert to other various types of resources to move up this research track to get victory points. That is start and finish what this game is. It is get resources, to get more resources, to get victory points. One of the things that I think is quite novel about this game is that despite what I've described as sounding almost exactly as the base premise of Dune Imperium, which we spoke about last week, it goes to such great lengths to make everything about this process very friendly, very kind, very, very Euro. In the way that I lauded Dune Imperium for being quite punitive in a surprising way last week, The Ruins of Arnak is not that. It's a very friendly, very pleasant game that's going to sort of kick off all your ganz clever dopamine of, if I get this resource and I can convert it to this to move up here, which will give me this resource, which I will be able to use with this resource to move up this spot on the track. And when you do those moves, you feel great. It feels very rewarding. You've played the perfect card that you acquired the turn before in order to facilitate all of this. And the reason all of that works so cohesively is because there are so many very finely tuned reins on the whole experience. And that's not a negative. Your deck size is extremely small. You literally start this game with a deck of 6 cards. There are 5 rounds in this game, and you have 2 workers. So you're doing 10 worker placements. You're probably acquiring about 7 cards over the course of the game, which means you're going to go through your deck probably 2 or 3 times at most. It's so tightly honed in every way, and it gives you a lot of little opportunities to work around the restrictions in ways that feel fun, in ways that feel rewarding.
Is it feel like you're deck building if you're doing that little?
No, and that's actually, funnily enough, that is a bullet point I have on my notes here, which is, in some ways, despite it being a deck building game, despite it being a worker placement, it doesn't really feel like a deck builder. In kind of the exact opposite of the way that you mentioned last week, Helen. One of the things you said about Dune is you look at the worm card that's like, oh, there's your province equivalent. Here's your silver equivalent, the card that's going to give you 2 more persuasion so you can buy more things. Arnak doesn't really have a lot of that. It kind of just uses deck building as the structure, because when you acquire an item card in Arnak, it's just going to go on the bottom of your deck immediately, which means you're almost guaranteed to get it next round, and you probably will get it one more time after that, if at all ever again. So it's a lot more about setting up for your immediate futures in a way that very loosely just uses the structure of deck building. It's very, very interesting.
So as a person who hasn't played either Dune Imperium or Lost Ruins, I have heard a lot of people comparing them, and there is the deck building plus worker placement, right?
Yeah.
But based on your explanation and the explanation last week we had of Dune Imperium, it doesn't feel like there's that much more shared DNA, or am I missing things?
I think that is 100% true.
Okay.
I think that, like, one of the things that I was sort of biting my tongue a little bit when people were having those discussions in our Discord of, like, which of these worker placement deck building hybrids do I pick? It's kind of like, they're not really that similar.
Okay. Is you saying that they're quite different a quote-unquote hot take? Because I saw a chat on Discord about it, but I've also seen people talk about this on Reddit as a straight comparison, like which one should I buy? And on BGG even, like there's talk about which of these two. And it feels like, and I may not be reading enough into it, but it feels like people are saying like, this is an alternative to that.
I think that would be where I land. I think what is the most fascinating about, especially having played both of these games in quick succession, is that I want to own both. You know, because they're giving me extremely different feelings. That's not just a function of the fact that, you know, Dune is a more interactive, conflicty game, which are the sorts of games that we as a podcast gravitate towards a lot. I'm under no illusion that Arnak would be a game that would be very successful on this podcast, because it's a very me and maybe a little bit more you sort of game, Mark. Like,
right.
It doesn't strike me as a game that Kellen would love. It doesn't strike me as a game that Christina would love, because it is in some ways, I remember I said this last week, that I was afraid that Dune Imperium was going to end up as this very medium Euro. But in some ways, this is that game, but it's almost like the best possible version of that game. It is a very satisfying puzzle in every single time I played it, and it's so fast. Like, I've mentioned that you have 10 placements, 5 rounds of the game. I have not played a game of this that has gone long over an hour. And to be fair, that's at 2 players, so that might be a very different situation in 3 or 4. But I don't think this would go longer than 90 minutes, even at a 4-player count. It's one of those games that you're going to get to the end of and be like, God, you know, it's that Marco Polo thing. I wish I had one more way, because if I had one more resource, then I could move up this and this and this and do that, you know? It's going to leave you wanting more, and it's going to leave you wanting to run it back. And to that point, I played this with my girlfriend, who does not play a lot of board games, and she immediately wanted to run it back. This is easily, in my estimation, the heaviest game that she's played, and by her account, her favorite of any of the board games we've played.
Okay.
Which, I can't stress this enough. You know, it's not a extremely heavy game, but it strikes me as an excellent sort of next step game for someone, right?
Right.
Where you'd have to, like, convince them that, you know, trust me, we're going to get through these rules, and it's going to seem like a lot, but it's all going to work out, and you're going to feel so satisfied by the process of it, because of, in the case of that, you know, if I were to be the most negative about this in the Kellen sort of way, it has the edges worn off. No, I mean this in the way that Kellen wouldn't love about it, right? Like,
yeah,
it does a lot of things to help you get out of trouble. You can move an idol up to this, sacrifice a little bit of points to get a resource that will be just enough to unlock your thing. The worker placement play is not as punishing as in Dune, where you look at your hand and like, well, I can't do anything I wanted to do. There's a lot of little, I can pay 2 coins maybe to just get the icon I need to go here. You know what I mean? It gives you a lot of little workarounds in a way that feels rewarding and pleasant. At the same time, it is a game where in one of your 10 actions, you'd have to send a worker into the unknown, not knowing what worker placement spot you're even going to get out of there, right? So know that that's what you're getting into. It's not necessarily a game where sometimes you just have to sort of roll with what's going to happen to you and work around that in a way that will never feel very punishing, but it's a little bit of best laid plans in a short game might go awry. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who finds generic explorer theme to be about the most annoying and distasteful theme of all? Like, it's just like generic Indiana Jones, but not Indiana Jones going on an adventure in yon wilderness. Even in the games we love, like our friend Dr. Reiner Knizia's game, Quest for El Dorado, I just find the theme like really obnoxious. I don't know what it is. It's just obnoxious is the word that I think of.
I don't have quite as strong a distaste for it, but for whatever reason, one of the few Knizia games I don't like, or I don't love, is Quest for El Dorado, and the theme has never done anything for me.
I think that it is definitely one on the checklist of generic board game themes that you can use, but I think that one of the reasons I appreciate it sometimes over generic space or generic medieval game is like there's a color palette to it that is actually, I think, quite enticing. Like, you look at this board and it's this lush greens and blues. It's quite beautiful. It's quite striking. It's a mix of colors that I don't often see in a board game, which, you know, if you're going to pick a generic theme, at least pick one that doesn't get used as often as all the other generic themes.
There's never been a video game that's used this theme successfully before.
Yeah, exactly. It can't be done.
There's the editorial comment thrown in there for that.
So just to close out my thoughts on this, because at risk of maybe sounding a little bit overzealous about this, I think you need to know what you're getting into here. It is a very medium weight experience. It is a game that I think is so good at being an excellent medium weight experience, and a game that I think if you have a group or players that you'd want to take a next step board game experience with, I cannot recommend this enough. I think if you're a diehard gamer or a very heavy Eurogamer, this might just come across as another one of those, but I can't stress enough that it's a very, very good one of those.
Is this rife for, getting the even Loster Ruins of Arnak next year?
I think it's got a lot of room for expansion in it, frankly.
Yeah.
By virtue of being at least a proportionally card-driven game, you could just have a whole bunch of artifacts, a whole bunch of item cards that would just change the way that the game plays through an expansion easily. That is The Lost Ruins of Arnak by CGE.
Mark, what do you got
sir.
for us today?
I have a game called...
We're leaving Arnak. And where are we headed to,
Wait,
Mark?
how did we leave Arnak? I want to know what that sound effect meant. Was that us walking or...
Flying.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've flown to the wonderful... Is Ohanami a place? You know Japanese culture, Kellen?
Yeah, let me quickly think about
that. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack.
I'm thinking. The first thing comes up is BGG, so now I have to add the word define to it. Hanami is a traditional Japanese custom of enjoying the beauty of flowers.
Okay.
So I'm going to assume that's what happened.
Okay. So we're going to go from the lost, ruinous city of Arnak, and we're going to, what? Enjoy flowers?
Enjoy the flower viewing.
Enjoy the flower viewing in the Japanese countryside.
Yes.
In Ohanami. So Ohanami is, simply put, the game, but competitive. The way this works is you have 3 piles in front of you that you're building. The cards are numbered from 1 to 106 or something like that, maybe 115, I don't know, can't remember. But they come in 4 colors: blue, green, gray, and pink. So on your turn, you start with something like 10 cards in your hand. And everybody at the table is going to simultaneously pick 2 cards. And once everybody's selected 2 cards, you're going to flip them face up and put them in some combination of your 3 piles. So you can put them both in one pile, or you can split them up into 2 different piles. And when you're placing them in your piles, you have to place higher number cards on the top of piles and lower number cards on the bottom of piles. So if I have a pile that has the number 15 and the number 18 and the number 20 in that order, and I have a card, a 27, and I want to put it in that pile, I would put it on top of the 20 in that pile. Or I could start a new pile with just that 27, assuming I still had empty piles to spare. So it's basically like, if you've played the game, it's that same sort of thing where you're picking 2 cards and you're playing them, you're slotting them either higher than or lower than any of the piles you have built. And then with the remainder of the cards you didn't select, you're going to pass them either left or right, depending on the round. That'll alternate. So like in the first round, you're passing them, I think, to the left, and the second round, you're passing them to the right. So it's a draft in that way. You'll take the cards that the other player didn't select. You'll select 2 of those. You'll wait for everybody else to select them, reveal them, place them in your pile, pass the remaining cards along, so on and so forth until you're past 2 cards that you are forced to either play or discard. You can always discard cards if you don't want to put them in your pile. You do this for 3 rounds. In the first round, you are scoring just your blue cards. So you'll count the number of blue cards you have, and you'll score 3 points per card. Blue cards will always score in that manner. So at the end of the first round, second round, and third round, blue cards will score 3 points per card. In the first round, they're the only thing that scores. In the second round, green cards now come into play, and they score 4 points per card. So again, you don't care about the number of the card. You don't care if it's a 104 green or a 2 green. Just you're counting the number of cards you have. They all score 4 points. In the final round, blue scores, as it has every round, scores 3. Again, green will score again 4 points per card. And now gray will score 7 points per card. So gray only scores once, but it scores more. And finally, pink now will also score for the first time, but it will be a cumulative triangle type scoring where if you only have 1 pink card, say, you'll score something like 1 point. But if you get the maximum, if you cap out at the maximum, which is 15 pink cards, you'll score 120 points. So the value per pink card goes up the more you have. But again, they're not scoring until the very end. Same with gray, which score a lot, but only once. So what do you guys think of Ohanami?
So here's the deal, friends. I have the game in my top 50 games of all time, which is sad because it's a cooperative game, and I don't like cooperative games. So when you say, I'm going to take the game, but I'm going to move it to Japan, and I'm going to make it a competitive experience, you have made a game for me. for me. I had a wonderful time playing this. I want to play it many more times very quickly so that I can develop my opinion a little bit more on it. I think that all of us were playing it too safe when we first played this and were unwilling to go too far above or too far below on our score piles, which made the last round a little bit too easy. My hope is that as we get more competitive at the game, that third round becomes a big moment of bust, and there are huge groans at the end of, oh my God, I can't do what I wanted to do, and I hate this game, and, Mark, I'm going to kill you, and Christina, it's over betwixt us. Those are the kind of feelings that I want, and those moments do happen in the game where you screw up and the game ends, right. Where this doesn't have that same feeling. The scoring is a little bit Euro. Everything scores for everything. It's very, very pleasant. I love the idea of this. I'm very excited to have this game. I just want to play it more and see how that end game evolves as we get better at playing it.
I think that you hit on both my biggest joy and my biggest complaint with the game, not with the game, but with Ohanami, which is that, yes, absolutely, I love the feeling of constraint. And I've mentioned this a lot in the context of roll and writes, and it's something that the game does really, really well, where you're a victim of your own mistakes, where you put a card, you think, this is going to be fine, I'm going to put this card 10 higher, and then 2 turns later, you're like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. That was a big mistake. What was I thinking? I think that Ohanami didn't feel like it was punishing me enough for me taking big transgressions like that in a way that I felt like even though I wasn't playing too tightly in terms of how packed my cards were, but I was still able to kind of comfortably play everything at the end of the game. I never got to a spot where I couldn't play, which I would have liked it maybe to have fallen a little bit in that spectrum of wanting you to play better, because otherwise what happens is it just becomes a game about drafting the best color for you. But I don't think that is necessarily going to bear out in repeat plays once you learn what the spread of cards that Ohanami is willing to reward you for, right? Because as you start to get looser with that structure, it will start to punish you. And finding that right balance is exactly what the game wants you to try to figure out. I thought that all the elements that I like about drafting, hate drafting, seeing that Mark was building up a collection of blue cards and being like, well, I'm not giving Mark any more blue cards, but if I do that, then I'm hurting my chances of getting all the pink cards I need. So, those decisions are fun.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite part of this game was when you were whittling down, when you had 4 cards in hand and you were trying to decide which are these 2. This is the last time you're going to have control over which 2 you select. And you look over at who you're passing the cards to, and you base your decision 90% not on what helps you most, but what you want to hand them because they can't play them. They literally don't have the space to play them.
Mark's revealing he sat next to me when we played.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For sure. I will agree with both your points. I think the right criticism and the right pro of this game. I don't know if it's going to get tighter. I don't know how much playing more wildly or more recklessly would have helped scoring. At least for me, I didn't feel like I could have maybe done more, but it's a situation where if one person starts playing more recklessly or, taking bigger chances, it probably cascades and affects everybody at the table. So that'll be interesting to see. But I'll say, even if it doesn't get much tighter, which I think would be better if the game was a little more constrictive, where at the end you really were sweating what cards you're going to be able to play, I think that would make for a better game. But even as it is, even if that doesn't bear out, that it doesn't get there for us, I still really, really enjoyed it. I still think as like a pleasant 20-minute, 30-minute card game, I think it's great. I really, really had a great time.
Mark, I even felt like during the rules explanation, I knew you were going to like it, because I got about like 2/3 of the way through it, and you were just like, this all makes sense.
Yeah,
like I get what's happening here and how this has evolved from past games, but also is its own kind of interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is right up my alley. Like, card game, small rule set, but like tight choices. It's not as like, punishing as something like Arboretum, but this is great. It's just really pleasant, really fun. I could teach this to my mom without worrying that she wouldn't get it. The scoring, even though you score 3 times, it's really straightforward. You're just counting cards.
Yeah. There is no question that Ohanami is coming back home with me for Christmas, provided I can get the review copy out of Neelan's house and back to my house so that I can have it for Christmas.
So that is Ohanami. Kellen, take us to our next locale. How are we getting there? We're in Japan.
Bloop, 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 bloop.
All right.
What was
That was a rocket ship. Space. Where we are going beyond the sun. Oh boy. It's a doozy.
This was designed by a rocket scientist.
Dennis Chan. Is he a rocket scientist?
Yeah,
How
he
do
is.
you know that?
I heard...
He's a physicist.
Yeah, he could be a rocket scientist and be a physicist.
Software engineer.
Oh, well, never mind.
And he plays the pipe organ, Mark.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
I don't know where you got your faulty information, but mine's from the back of the rule book. Beyond the Sun is the latest release from Rio Grande Games, or Rio Grande Games. And this is a review copy provided by the publisher to us. Rio Grande makes really good board games and has been around for a long time. So when a new game comes out from this publisher, I get excited and I look into it. When I looked into it, I heard, hey, if you like innovation, you may like some of what's going on here. That was enough. I was beyond the moon to try the game Beyond the Sun.
Nice.
And I'm here to talk about it. This will be extremely challenging to convey in a podcast format because of how big the game is and how big physically the game is. Essentially, Beyond the Sun is a tech tree game. Tech trees come to us, I'm sure, from video games somewhere where you invest in skills and you work your way down a skill tree to where you become advanced beast master or advanced grenadier. And the further down the specialties you go, the cool benefits and powers that you unlock. But each choice that you make is a choice that you don't make in another technology that you could. So this is used in a lot of games, Twilight Imperium, Kemet to some degree, but Beyond the Sun posits, what if most of the game was a tech tree? So there's a giant board in Beyond the Sun that is literally level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 technologies. And you are playing a action selection game of quick actions to research new technologies and move your species up through the technologies, so as you explore Beyond the Sun. Ultimately, Beyond the Sun is broken down into 2 separate things that are happening at once. You are fighting combat, you're fighting for control of the galaxy on the space board, and you are researching new technologies on the other board, and they both feed into each other, in addition to you having your own player board where you're trying to improve your economy. It sounds like a lot, and it is when you're first getting into it, but one of the best things about Beyond the Sun is how smooth and quick a turn is. On a single turn in Beyond the Sun, you take 1 action of the basic actions, which are things like research a level 1 technology, or pay 2 ore, and you can research a level 2 technology, provided you have the prerequisites for that technology from level 1. Or allows you to jump 2, move your ships around on the combat map. Or gain some humans, so take your generic supplies, spend some ore, and convert them into people. A turn in Beyond the Sun is very simple. Take one of those actions, and then choose one of your 3 types of production. Produce people, produce ore, or tradesies, kind of swap you around, less efficient action, but you can do it. And that is the whole game, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. A typical game of Beyond the Sun is not that many turns, probably between 14 to 20 turns. So 14 to 20 actions that you're taking and productions that you're producing. Don't let my poor explanation stop you from investigating Beyond the Sun. I have no question, I have no doubt that we will return to talking about this. There is no doubt in my mind that this is the best game that I have played in 2020. I don't need to say, oh, what did I think of this? It's very interesting. There is a lot going on. I thought that it was going to be too complicated, even for me. I like heavier games, but not heavy games. This, once you are playing, is smooth as butter, which is very, very cool. You invest in technologies. You go down the red technology track, which is going to help you get more red technologies and upgrade your ability to move your ships around the board and make more ships. Or you could be involved in science, which is going to help you research more and more technologies. The level 1 and level 2 technologies are very, very tame. The level 3 and level 4 technologies are increasingly more interesting and different, with the level 4s being the, oh my god, why do you get to score points for that? I wish I could do that type actions. The entire game clock is built around an achievement system where as soon as enough people have achieved, the game goes one more turn and then it's over. Each game will have the same 2 achievements in every game, which goes back to what I mentioned about there basically being 2 big boards that are important, right? In each game, as soon as you research a level 4 technology, you achieve. So that's one of the actions. Each time you colonize 4 planets, which is an action you take by putting a bunch of combat on a planet, you achieve. And so those 2 options need to be in both games to bring balance to the game. And then in addition to that, you have 1 more achievement from an A deck and 1 more achievement from a B deck that are random, that will kind of give flavor and differentiation to each game. Neelan, what did you like about Beyond the Sun?
I was surprised how much I liked this game. I knew that based on your little description when you sort of sold it to me as, oh, it's a little bit of innovation, but it's got tech trees. And I was like, that sounds cool, I'm in. But then when I dig into it more and it's a space game with a veneer of sending spaceships out to explore and colonize, of researching new techs, of a almost through the ages-esque economy to it, with the way your pieces move around the player board is a lot of the systems that define how your economy works in a much, much more simplified manner than through the ages. But a little bit of that, okay, this piece is going to move from here, which will allow me to turn into population and so on. It has so many systems that I love in games that it was almost a given that I was going to at least dig it a little bit. But I was shocked by how well and cohesively all of that worked together to just create a game that I adored right off the bat. One of the main things I loved so much about it is probably one of the more innovation-y things about it, which is when you get to, like, say, I'm going to research level 3 tech, right? You draw 2 cards from this deck of cards. You don't know what those are going to be. You look at them and you're like, oh, wow, I could do this now? That's crazy. Or, oh, wow, I could do this now? That's crazy. And you have to choose between one of those things, and that becomes your tech. Now, Kellen could come in later and research that, but I've now chosen and defined the tech that is going to occupy this spot on the tech tree. And that feels cool, because every time someone's researching a new tech, they're enhancing the flavor of that game, like red cracked pepper, but
crushed
red pepper. And that feels cool. That feels like every game of this is going to be unique just by virtue of having a uniquely different tech tree. The way that the achievements also sort of alter the taste of the game a little bit. Like, our game, we had a card that was someone had to be a warlord by having a bunch of high-powered ships and multiple planets, which is in some ways in conflict with the other objective, which is to spend those ships to colonize planets. I felt like it was going to feel different every single time, but it still has a very solid core of that resource board management and very, very interactive vying for control of planets. It was cool as heck, man. I liked it a lot.
I'd only heard a little bit about this game, and then I saw a little bit more about it when we were researching our Essen lists. And when you guys, in our bonus episode, so if you are a patron, you could have heard that. In the bonus episode, when you guys were singing this game's praises, it got me like super, super psyched for it. But now, Kellen describing it, I wanted to sort of follow along, so I pulled up the BGG page and was looking at it. And like, I like space themes fine. I think for you guys, it clicks in even harder. But for me, it's a fine theme. It doesn't bother me. I like them in general, but it's not a big hook. But as Kellen's starting to describe it, I'm looking at the game. I'm looking at the art, which is nice, which is definitely nice. And I'm looking at the back of the box, which, has a layout of, an in-progress game. And I remember a review I sort of skimmed through, and it doesn't feel, from what I'm looking at, like a game that is going to be fantastic. That's just my looking at the box. It doesn't click for me. And so this feels to me like, I think there's some hype for it for sure, but like, I'm super excited to hear so much positivity from you guys about this, because this is a game that I probably would have otherwise skipped.
So I think there's a couple things. One, the game is over $50, which is expensive, for a modern board game. It also takes up way too much table space, and is pretty annoying to figure out where people should sit. I've only played this game 2 players with Neelan and Christina separately, and I think the best way to sit would be side by side each other, because you're reading a giant board with small tech stuff going on. I think it's visually impressive. I think the dice are cooler than they appear kind of in some of the promotional materials. So it's not without any flaws. It's just for how much there is going on, it's way smoother than you would think.
Yeah.
3 turns into it.
Your description of it totally brought that to the fore. Like the fact that turns move really quickly is something that I had not gleaned from reading up about it. That wasn't like a major selling point that I'd picked up on.
What I will say for longtime listeners of the podcast is that my second game of Beyond the Sun, I was still extremely enthused by, but I did notice that I think that this game is going to end up being in Neelan's collection versus staying in my collection, which is to say that the powers themselves are very carefully gated in certain specific ways. So colonize, for example, is an action where you take a planet and it becomes yours. So being able to move your ships and then colonize would be a very, very powerful action. So the ability to combo things off of each other and have this provide super benefits here, I don't think it's as combo-y as I want it to be. I want the LOL innovation Carl Chudyk expansion that changes out the technology and puts in the wild and wacky stuff that I'm into. It does have that flavor of, oh my God, why can Neelan do that and why can't I do that? But it is guarded. It's guarded in a very Euro sense, and you can see that when you look at how it scores.
Yeah.
Because you get points for everything.
Which is something I wanted to bring up in your description for it just now. I mean, I heard it described, I think, as like a innovation. There's like an innovation pedigree there, but in your description it felt more like leaning on the tech tree side and less on the innovation, and what you're saying now sort of buoys that thought. So it's more of like tech tree and less innovation game breaking combo deal.
Yes, 100 million %.
Right.
But the system of prerequisites is interesting, right? So a level 3 technology has either 1 or 2 inputs into it, and you then have to choose, right? So it's either going to be a military power or it's going to be an economic power, and you have to say I'm looking for red, and then you just draw from the deck until you get red powers. Okay,
right.
But those red powers can actually be split red yellow or red green or red blue. So you can sort of will your way towards technology that you do need or want that is sort of missing from your tech tree.
Okay.
And so on an individual turn, there is that innovation feeling of, I have 7 action options, a full array of different actions that all do different little things, and I've got to figure out what's going to eke me closer to the victory than any of the other ones. It's very clever. It's very fun. More than anything, I think for us, we need to play at 4-player.
Yeah.
I think the very next step is put it at 4-player, see how long it runs, see how smooth it is, see how upset we feel at each other with the space combat. And this combat system is built very smart. It is precisely built to not make people too upset. If you get too strong in the combat, you must take away your ships in order to colonize a planet, and everyone else just gets kicked back to the middle and only has a very, very small penalty for not having had the most control on that planet. So it's very carefully designed to be a little fighty, a little back and forth. Neelan and I were going back and forth, but never feeling super frustrated by what was happening. So I think there's very smart, small things being done in the combat engine that is fun.
Sounds good. I can't wait. This is like the game I'm most anticipating to play.
I do want to say, though, I do think that at 2 players, it felt really good. As excited as I am to play it at the full count with all of you, I was definitely impressed by how it felt like a full game without compromises at 2 players.
Quick last question. How did Christina, I know she's obviously a big Innovation fan, how did she feel about it generally, you think?
I think her initial reaction was, oh my god, how is our dining room table covered by this game that's only 2 players, and why are we sitting shoulder to shoulder? She beat me, and pretty handily, too. I would say Christina liked it. We had an interesting game where it appeared that I was dominating, just destroying her, and then ultimately she ended up winning the game. So we had kind of a what led us to this moment, and we broke down all the different points, and she had just researched a ton more technology than me, but never had a chance at all in the combat engine. And so there is an interesting thing where even the word achievements, I think, is probably a misnomer in this game, because it's more of a game timer that gets you some points. And it even in the rulebook, one of the clarifications is you can't not achieve, even if you don't want to. Meaning, like, hey, there may be opportunities where you don't want to achieve, but you have to.
Right.
And I think it got to the place on the last game where I triggered the end game, but would have been better off elongating it, which is not something I love, but I want to investigate further. That is Beyond the Sun by Rio Grande Games, designed by Dennis Chan. Very good, very interesting, very excited to have played it. And I am not a hype master, so that is Beyond the Sun. We had the opportunity to do our bonus episode of the podcast for patrons this past month live on Halloween as a video where we did Q&A, where we talked with people, and we were on camera. That's what on video means. And had a great time. And just wanted to give a shout out to all of our current patrons, but also a call that you can support Board Game Barrage on Patreon. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon or patreon.com/boardgamebarrage. It is much appreciated. It gives you access to exclusive Discord channels where we're talking with other patrons. It also helps give us capital to acquire new games that we cover on the podcast and upgrade our equipment and give us the stuff that we need to do video. We are on the hunt to do more video content, and anything you can do to help the podcast is much appreciated. But yeah, I think even more than a call for new patrons, just a huge thanks to our current patrons. We're hoping to do much more live content as we go forward.
Absolutely. And I will say that if you subscribe and become a patron, you will see that 2 beings were dressed up for our Halloween episode. Now, why did Mark say the word beings? Well, there's only one way to find out, and I said it for a very specific reason. So you'll have to join our Patreon and download that episode to see what I mean when I say 2 beings were dressed up.
I can't believe we stooped this low.
Anything for the cash.
Save our show.
Costume number 2 is going to blow your mind.
All right, today's featured topic is on compromise. We each devised a statement of something that we'd be willing to give up in exchange for something else in the board game world, and then we're going to discuss it. So to illustrate this compromise, I will go first with my compromise, which is a compromise, dear listeners, and that is that I would be willing to get rid of 95% of the theming of all board games, all of them, in exchange for reducing the length of play by 20 minutes or more. That is to say, every game I own, I would get rid of all of the theme. We could take Cthulhu Wars and make it squares versus circles versus triangles. And if that reduced the playtime by 20 minutes or more, I would happily make that sacrifice. No more Mr. Cthulhu. Now we've got Mr. Triangle and Mr. Robazon. Oh, that's not a shape. What shape, Neil?
Rhombus?
Rhombus, sure.
Oh, that one. Rhombus. Mr. Rhombus. They're all there. And I've saved 20 minutes of my life in which I can play more games. Or more. How do you respond, good sirs?
I think this is a lie. I think you are lying to yourself.
I agree.
And lying to the American people.
You don't even
This
believe
American people.
The
What are you talking
worldwide
about?
audience. Dude, come on. You're going to change all your stuff to circles and squares and be happy? No way.
Yes,
It's
easy
not
money.
True. Not
I'm
true.
going to save time. What are you talking about?
No way.
Give me a counterexample. Innovation, kill the theme.
Okay,
Don't care at all.
Innovation has no theme whatsoever.
Yeah, forget
What?
Cthulhu Wars.
Excuse me?
But like you know that half of the joy of Cthulhu Wars is splashing down the giant winged Cthulhu or the giant
Well, no.
crazy tentacle
No, he's going to
monster.
splash down the giant wings. He's
Yeah.
splash down the giant circle.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we would have to have them be as big as if that
Right,
SRP
exactly.
is still $200.
This
Big circle,
Giant
big
wooden
square.
cylinder that is Cthulhu.
Yeah, I don't think that any of my love, specifically of Cthulhu Wars, I'm happy to be challenged on other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't like the Cthulhu theme.
No, I know
to be
that.
honest,
So-
which is
so-
why I've added tuxedos and stuff to my
But you're
coffee.
saying, like, if you looked at your collection and they were all black and white boxes and everything is circles and squares and numbers, you know what? Actually, you're proving your whole thing about you just want to drop down a 1 and, like, forget about the flavor text.
Yeah.
You just want 1s and 2s and 3s on your cards.
So, I mean, I think that, like, in a people on a map type game, the conflict can't be, like, cross-fighting star, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to even grok what was happening.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you reduce it to where it's just, like, a card that says lion on it, you know, and then you have cards that say, like, cheetah or whatever, that would be
Like
fine.
the most generic theme, like taking it down to like literally just big creature versus small creature versus medium creature.
That's right. And this is really...
For 20
Built.
minutes, though? You don't want to ask for a little bit more than that?
This is built on all of the games that add extra rules, extra little things for the sake of thematic. I value my time. My billable rate is at least,
$50 an hour, right? Did we figure that out?
I don't know, $400 an hour.
Right. I mean, you value your time more than your enjoyment.
I like circles.
That's true. That's
You've
true.
always been a big geometry proponent.
Yeah.
So, from what I understand, my compromise you both agree with. Aye, Captain. Say it with me.
I disagree. More theme,
All right.
less geometry. My compromise is that I would happily have, in exchange for cards where you have to reference a book to decipher their iconography, have every card just be a wall of text. This is so
Something to get behind.
infuriating in something like Kemet, where you have these divine intervention cards and they're all these icons and you look at them and you're like, what does this one do again, Neelan? It's like, oh, don't worry, Mark, I got you covered. Here's this book that explains it. And then you're halfway through reading the explanation of that, but Christina wants to borrow the book from you so she can look up her divine intervention cards. Meanwhile, Kellen's looking at all of the technology tiles, and he doesn't know what any of those mean, so he's waiting for the book too. Oh, but I accidentally handed you the French book because they're both in there, because the only reason they do this is so they don't print any text on the things, which would make the whole thing so much easier. This annoys me no end. This came up in Dune Imperium, where we had cards that have text on the cards, and someone would ask, does this mean what I think it does? And I'd have to go, oh, let me see if there's a clarification of that in the rulebook. Just put the text on the card. It's already there. You have the space to put the whole text. I don't get it. Like, I know that there are limits of this where, like, you want to be able to, like, glance at a thing and at a glance see what that iconography means. But sometimes if you can't even tell, even after looking up the rule, the specific wording or the specific execution of the iconography without consulting another document, why bother in the first place?
Neelan, we're voting tomorrow. Language independence. Are you against independence?
I am not against independence.
And he ain't allowed to vote, Mark.
Yeah,
so I don't know
exactly.
what you're talking about. Okay, but Neelan,
Yeah.
let's be reasonable for once in your life. Two things. One, that would drive up the cost, right? Because some of this is for language independence. So are you willing to compromise? More compromise.
I get it. But language independence is a cost on the publisher. It's like you're driving a hard bargain where you're saying, like, oh yeah, but this will make the game more expensive to make, and then consumers will have to pay more. Other games do this. Other games manage this just fine.
Okay. And then two, right? If the text is long enough to explain all the things that you want it to explain, you might have to also, in addition to sacrificing iconography, you would have to sacrifice artwork.
So, I mean, I get it. There is a point where, like, you have limited space in a box, right? I think at that level, you've done something wrong. Like, you either need to have more space to accommodate all the rules that your card entails, and I'm not saying, like, get rid of the artwork entirely. I'm not a madman, but at least factor that in to the design of your cards, to the graphic design of your cards, to incorporate all of the rules that a card entails. Or don't have cards that are secretly 3 paragraphs of rules text.
So both of my additions, you want the publisher to compromise.
The people making
the first
the
one,
game?
they pay more. And then in the second one, they need to make their game better. Yeah. So they pay more and do more design work because you've screwed up.
Exactly.
Friends.
Exactly. It's their mistake and we're suffering for it.
So is this like in Dominion, you know, you want the copper cards to not have a picture of copper on them, but to describe all the ways that you could use a copper?
No, I just wanted to say, I mean, it could just say gain 1 copper in that case, right? And again, not every game I feel is the most egregious version of this. And not every game needs this. But I'm thinking of something like a Feast for Odin, right? Where you draw an occupation card and you have no chance in hell. And they have a whole separate book, an appendix that is literally for the rules of the cards.
You know, it's a problem when, like, the appendix, you look on a card and it says, like, 2-F
Right.
on it, and you're like, oh, damn. They Dewey Decimal this stuff in here. That was more passion than I think I've ever heard from Neelan.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about this.
Nice. I like it. Fired up. All right. Mine is also on the darn publishers. You know I don't like spending money on games, but I would gladly throw in another $20, another $30 if I could get games that were worked on enough, give that money to some developers, and let's get these rules streamlined. Knizia can do it. Wallace and his weird games can do it. Friesa can do it. Let's just work on them a little bit more and just let's get the games a little bit more streamlined. I'm willing to pay for development to get a game that's cleaner.
Clarification question.
Yes.
Are you saying that the rules section itself will be easier to get through, or that there will be less rules?
Ideally both. The biggest thing that bothers me when it comes to rules are exceptions, though, or are so many rules that keeping them in your head is a big consideration in gameplay.
Explaining them, keeping them in your head is
right.
all just adding to the time.
Right, and subtracting from the enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like, I've got to worry about remembering all these and these exceptions, and I'm not engaging with the games. Knizia has games like Raw, like Lost Cities, like Schottentotten. Wallace has these games that are weird. They always have these weird aspects, but the rule sets are generally feel like as small as they can be. The brass games, Lancashire and Birmingham, are games that feel really refined. Friesa, same thing. The rule sets with Fresh Fish, with the game we just played, Fast Lost, the rule sets are very small, very easy to keep in your head, and allows you to like plug into the game more. And when we were talking about this before the show, Neelan was saying like the whole Kickstarter thing, where he would gladly pay more money if he just was guaranteed that the game would come more polished. I think that was what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that the best version of what you're describing for me is like Kickstarter bloat, right? Like the Nemesis, which feels like, guys, I would have given you a year of more time and like X much more money to just tighten this all up. But Mark, my question for you is, how many hundreds of dollars are you going to pay to Mr. Lacerda to fix these games?
Well, I mean, he's already getting about $100 per game from me anyway. You know, that's how much he's charging. You want to knock it up to $150 and get that game streamlined? Let's do it. Like, I'll raise your rate by 50% to get a game that's cleaner.
I'm so quiet because I'm trying to figure out what a $50 version of Biblios would...
No, Biblios is perfect. Biblios already is streamlined. Let's not worry about the perfection. Let's worry about the problems. Problems, not perfection.
Okay, if we had a BS button,
all right,
Kellen would be hitting it.
I'll
this
add
is
it
to
post.
say, could it be the noise that I was making earlier?
You want that to be the BS button? I'll make it that if you want.
I mean, it seems like it's a lot of buttons. You know, it took us to Japan, to space, to Beyond the Moon, The Sun. You don't buy games.
Right.
So, ergo, this is a lie.
But just think how much
That is a fair...
Think about you're hurting his trade value here.
Right. That's the thing. Like, okay, yes, I live outside the economy. We all know this. But what I'm saying is, like, I would trade more games for that. My equivalent of your American dollars, I would trade more games for better games. Is that what I'm saying? I think that's what I'm saying.
Got it.
I would make Neelan pay more for the game initially.
Yes.
I would trade him more
Got it. Okay.
to get that game.
I'm glad the truth has been revealed.
There you go.
These were our compromises. This felt like a little bit of like a mini hot questions.
Yeah.
Were we touching something?
I mean, I
Elon?
was.
No,
Well-
this is when you say ha ha hot for me.
Wait, what?
Say ha 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 ha.
Oh, hot. Oh, God. I had no
Yeah.
idea. You did that so badly that I had literally no idea what you were doing.
That's not true.
You mean a hot question?
Well, in this case, a compromise, not
Sorry. A hot tuck. I can't do it with the C's.
So we'd love to hear what compromises you would make. You can join our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Let us know what compromise you would make. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can find us in all forms of social media. Another one I just thought of, I would give up all flavor text for nothing.
All right. Well, let's end this episode.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to our patrons. Please reach out, talk to us. We love interacting and hanging out with you guys.
Join the Discord and go to the podcast channel and come in hot with your big compromises. I want some outlandish ones, and I want them defended. Don't just come in and drop in something stupid and not say anything about it.
Well, that was my plan.
You've already done so on the show.
As always, thank you to Heart Society Music for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album, Wake the Queen. Thank you, and good night.
Goodbye.
But I did want to talk about crushed red pepper before we started.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do
that's
it.
why I thought you had that look in your eye.
Yeah. I've been wanting
I
to talk to
see
you
it
about this for a while, so I'm glad it came out.
More as an expander, like salt or pepper, as opposed to like a sriracha, which is like, you, I'm changing the flavor.
What do you mean by expander?
Like an amplifier. It doesn't create its own flavor. So if you have a boring pizza
Yeah.
and you put crushed red pepper on it,
Yeah.
now you have a boring pizza that's spicy. As opposed
Yeah.
to change that up, flip that, put sriracha on that.
I think I generally disagree. I think so.
Well, you'd be wrong.
I think I see the
When was the last time you had crushed red pepper?
oh my god, I don't
Was
know.
it
I'm
less than
familiar
10
with
minutes
crushed red
ago?
pepper though. I don't need like I don't need to have had it last week to be familiar with it. But I see it as like if I have crushed red pepper on a pizza, on like an otherwise boring pizza, it does feel like a zig when the rest of the pizza is zagging.
I'm looking in Neelan's eyes and he agrees with me.
I mean, no, but like I kind of feel this way sometimes a lot about just like spice in terms of like temperature spice, right? Like the spiciness of a food, and like when you order a curry, especially in Indian food, and it's like either mild, medium, or hot, and you kind of feel like the more of that you're adding to the food, all you're doing is enhancing the additional flavors. It's not like its own flavor. So I get what you're saying. I don't know if we're really in the same ballpark here, but I don't see a lot of spices as necessarily their role being to like alter the flavor of food.
But let me ask you this, Neelan. When was the last time you had Indian food?
Not that long ago.
Do you even know what a paneer is?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can get the best paneer at a local place called Trader Joe's.
Uh-huh.
Sog paneer. Very delicious.
Yep.
Palak paneer. I'm being corrected.
You guys are both like pro spicy food?
Yes.
Generally, I've actually pivoted a little bit recently. I don't know why. I used to
Got
eat
old.
very- yeah, probably. But I
Pivot.
mean, I grew up eating like very hot food.
Let me
Now I
clarify.
just don't.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. Hot rather than
Yeah,
spicy.
sure. Yeah.
What do you
Both
mean?
Hot? Like
Hot.
Like
Hot
spicy-
is the temperature of the food.
okay.
Spicy is what it does to your
Somebody
tongue.
could say like salt is like a spice. You spice a food by adding salt to it. But I'm talking about foods that have capsaicin in it.
Yes.
Salt is a spice, but it's not spicy.
Okay, that's why I even said
Do you understand the English language?
Okay, in terms of capsaicin, heat, that level, that kind
That's
of
not how you pronounce that word. Don't trick
Is
me.
it?
I think it might be. I'm not
I think
sure.
it is.
I don't know. I've never said it
But
aloud.
so you're pro spicy as in hot foods, Kellen?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I actually feel sometimes when I've ordered stuff with Kellen in the past, I feel like I remember you getting hotter than me generally, like more often.
That's
than not.
right.
I am not into hot food at all. Enjoy the food, don't fight the food. That's always been my philosophy.
That's exactly why I've come down to it, because I'm like, well, am I enjoying this as much as I'm just drowning myself with water
Yeah,
till I
what do
get
you,
past
what's
the
the
heat?
point? You're just fighting it. You're just sweating. Everybody looks miserable when they're eating it.
There is a point, though. There's a perfect point where it's just the right spiciness, and you actually do get the full, like the flavor flowing through you.
I'm not willing to take that risk. Not a gamble I want to make.
There's flavorful spicy, and then there's just additive spicy, like the aforementioned crushed red pepper.
Right.
Yeah. But before we do that, we are going to be covering some of the hottest games in board gaming with can I say them? The Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Yeah.
The Lost Ruins Arnak?
I'll take Arnak. I've been saying Arnak, but who knows?
Oh, the Lost Ruins of Arnak. The Lost Ruins of Arnak. The Lost Ruins of Arnak. So with the at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mark, you'll do the magic, depending on, we're going to reach out to the publisher because we have very high standards.
I'll reach out to the Arnaki people.
And they will... today on the podcast, by Rio Grande Games, or Rio Grande, who can say? We can't, because we have no editorial standards.
I bet the people of Arnak could.
The Arnaki people can handle spice, despite what anyone otherwise would say or could say about them. And they reject any notion that,
Let's just fill in this rich backstory of the Arnaki.
The Arnaki people?
Yeah.
Well, this is how all these RPGs that no one cares about fill stuff out. It's like, it's made up on the spot, and it's probably worse than this. It's like, oh my God. Wow, Mark, you stirred something inside of me.
Something deep in some deep well.
Yes,
right
something that not even the crushed red pepper could bring.
That's right.
My insides. All right. This is going to be a tough challenge, Mark, to get this
Yeah.
tight and cohesive. We're spinning gold, but it needs to be sifted through.
There's a lot of shit around it. It's laid in gold. Person who hasn't played either Dune Imperium or Lost Ruins
Of what? You got to pronounce it, Mark.
of Arnak.
The Arnaki people.
Of Arnak, consisting of the Arnaki people
Okay,
and
great.
their leaders and
The
scientists.
aforementioned
Exactly.
Capisan
That's right.
spices.
Yep.
So as a person who hasn't played either of those games,